My name is Harold. I'm 67 years old. For most of my life, I believed I understood two things perfectly: how to protect my family and how to recognize danger. I was wrong, because last Tuesday, my grandson slipped me a tiny folded note during dinner. Just two words: Unit 247. No explanation. No childish duded. Just a warning. And when I finally discovered what was inside that unit, I realized my family had been hiding something from me for years. Something that made my grandson afraid. Something that made my own son lie to my face. I'm telling you this now because I still don't know how deep this goes. And before I tell you what I found inside Unit 247, you need to hear how it all began. Because what started as a simple Sunday family dinner turned into the most disturbing mystery of my life. I live alone in the house I built with my own hands 40 years ago. My wife passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. Fast and cruel. After that, my son Daniel insisted I stay here instead of moving in with them. "You need your space, Dad. Your memories," he said. At the time, I thought he was being considerate. Now, I'm not so sure. Last week, Daniel called. "Dad, we're coming over Sunday. Karen, and Oliver too. It's been too long. Let's have dinner together." I was genuinely happy. At my age, time with family is the only thing that still feels important. I spent the whole day cooking. Roast chicken, fresh bread, apple pie, Oliver's favorite. When they arrived, I noticed small things immediately. Daniel's hug was quick, mechanical. Karen smiled, but her eyes stayed cold. And Oliver, my bright, talkative 8-year-old grandson, barely said a word. But kids get tired. I told myself not to overthink it. Dinner began normally enough. School, work, weather. Daniel talked about a new project at his job. Karen nodded too often, too precisely. Then Oliver dropped his fork. "I need the bathroom," he said quietly. As he walked past my chair, his small hand brushed mine. Something was pressed into my palm. A folded piece of paper. He didn't look at me, didn't smile, just kept walking, stiff, tense like a soldier under watch. Curious, I opened the note under the table. 2 words. Unit 247. That was all. A cold prickle ran up my spine. I leaned toward Daniel. "So, Oliver just gave me this. It says Unit 247. What does that mean?" Daniel froze. Karen's hand tightened around her glass. From the hallway, Oliver suddenly called out, "Grandpa, don't show them." Every sound in the room died instantly. Daniel forced a laugh. "Kids invent secret codes, Dad. Probably some school game." Kyle nodded fast. "Yes. Imagination. You know how children are." But Oliver stood in the doorway, pale as paper. His eyes were wide. His hands were shaking. I'd served in the military when I was young. I know what real fear looks like. My grandson was terrified. After dinner, while Daniel washed dishes and Karen stepped outside to answer a call, Oliver sat next to me on the couch. He whispered, "Grandpa, they're watching." My chest tightened. "Who's watching, son?" He shook his head quickly. "I'm not allowed to say, but you have to go to Unit 247 before they stop you." "Stop me from what?" But Oliver jumped up and ran to his parents. Minutes later, Daniel came in, smiling too hard. "We gotta go, Dad. Early day, tomorrow." They left in a hurry. Too much of a hurry. And when the door closed behind them, the house felt colder than it ever had. I stood alone in my living room, staring at that small piece of paper. Unit 247. My grandson had given me a warning, and I intended to find out why. That night, I didn't sleep. By morning, I made my decision. I was going to uncover the truth behind Unit 247, no matter what it cost me. I woke up before sunrise. The house was silent, the kind of silence that feels heavier after a sleepless night. The note lay on my kitchen table where I'd left it. Unit 247. 2 words that had already changed everything. I made coffee and stared at the paper like it might suddenly explain itself. Unit could mean anything. An apartment, a storage unit, a hospital room, a military division. But why would an 8-year-old child secretly warn his grandfather about it? I opened my laptop. My hands weren't shaking anymore. At my age, fear doesn't disappear. It hardens into determination. I typed, Unit 247 Daniel Karen Oliver. Nothing relevant. Then I searched. Unit 247 plus my city. Several results appeared, most meaningless, until one caught my eye. Silver Pines Residential Complex, Unit 247, an apartment listing website. Address only 15 minutes from my house. And the listed tenant name, K. Whitmore, Karen's maiden name. My stomach tightened. Why would my daughter-in-law have an apartment listed under her old name when she supposedly lived happily with my son? I checked the date. The listing had been updated just 3 weeks ago. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding slowly and heavily. Daniel had told me they'd moved to a new place closer to work. Had he ever actually given me their address? I suddenly realized, no, he hadn't. I'd never been invited to their new home. Not once. Every visit had been at my house. I picked up the phone and called Daniel. He answered on the third ring. Dad, everything okay? His voice sounded too awake, too prepared. I was thinking, I said calmly. I'd like to visit your new place today. Bring Oliver his old fishing rod. He left it here. Silence. Just half a second. But enough. Today's not good, Daniel said quickly. We're busy. Karen's not feeling well. I can come another day. Another pause. I'll call you back with a time. He hung up first. That confirmed it. Something was wrong. By late morning, I was in my car, driving toward the address listed for Silver Pines, Unit 247. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that there had to be a normal explanation. But as I turned into the complex, I felt the same instinct that had kept me alive decades ago in uniform. You don't ignore warning signs. Silver Pines was clean, quiet, gated. A keypad stood at the entrance. I parked outside and walked to the gate on foot. I pressed the intercom. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. Then I noticed something strange. On the directory sign, near the gate, small printed names were listed next to unit numbers. I scanned down. Unit 245, Unit 246, Unit 247, and next to it, vacant. I stared. Vacant. But the website had said Karen's maiden name was attached to that unit. Why would a vacant unit be listed under her name online? Unless the listing wasn't meant for the public. Unless it was meant for someone specific to find. My phone buzzed. Daniel. Dad, sorry. We're actually out of town for a few days. I'll tell you when we're back. Out of town. But Oliver had been in school yesterday. I knew because he'd told me about a spelling test. He'd lied. My son had just lied to me. I hung up without arguing. Then I did something I never thought I'd do at 67 years old. I climbed the fence. It wasn't high, just enough to discourage casual visitors. But I was stubborn and fueled by something stronger than caution. I walked through the quiet courtyard until I reached the building labeled Unit 247. The hallway smelled of fresh paint. Too fresh. I stood in front of the door. Brown. New lock. No scratches. No welcome mat. A truly vacant apartment. Or so it seemed. Then I noticed something taped low to the doorframe. So low most adults wouldn't see it. A tiny sticker. A cartoon dinosaur. The exact same one Oliver used to put on his school notebooks. My blood turned cold. My grandson had been here. And suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow. Deliberate. Not the casual steps of a neighbor. Heavy. Measured. Coming closer. I turned and found myself face to face with a man I had never seen before, but who was smiling at me like he already knew exactly who I was. The man was tall, broad shoulders, clean haircut, gray jacket, not threatening in appearance. But his eyes were too observant, too calculating, the kind of eyes that measure people. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked politely. I forced a casual smile. "I'm looking for my family," I said. "I think they lived in this unit." He glanced at the door, then back at me. "This unit is vacant," he said. "Has been for months." His tone was friendly, but his body was positioned slightly between me and the door, blocking access. I pointed at the small dinosaur sticker. "Then why is my grandson's sticker on the doorframe?" For the first time, his smile faltered. Just a flicker. He crouched, pretending to inspect the sticker. "Huh. Kids must play around here sometimes," he said. "They stick things everywhere." I knew he was lying. This complex was gated, quiet. No random children wandering around. I straightened my back. "Listen," I said. "My grandson gave me a note with this unit number. He was scared. Now I find a sticker here. so I'm going to open this door and see for myself. I reached for the doorknob. The man's hand shot out and gently, but firmly stopped mine. Sir, he said, still polite, you really shouldn't. The air between us changed. His voice was soft, but it carried an unmistakable warning. I held his gaze. I fought in a war, I said quietly. I know when someone is trying to intimidate me. His eyes sharpened slightly. Then he stepped back. If your family, he said, you should talk to Daniel first. My blood froze. You know my son? He didn't answer, just nodded once. That was all the confirmation I needed. I took a step back. Thank you for your time, I said calmly. I walked away, slowly, casually. Only when I turned the corner did I speed up. I didn't get into my car immediately. Instead, I watched the building from a distance. 5 minutes later, the man pulled out his phone and made a call. 10 minutes later, a black SUV arrived. No markings, tinted windows. 2 people went inside Unit 247 with him. They stayed 15 minutes, then left. And when I returned to the door afterward, the dinosaur sticker was gone, scraped clean, like it had never been there. I stood there a long time. The reality was sinking in. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't family drama. This was something organized, controlled, hidden, and my grandson was somehow inside it. I drove home in silence. Halfway there, my phone rang. Daniel again. Dad, he said, breathing a little fast. Are you okay? Why wouldn't I be? I asked. Another pause. I just had a weird feeling, he said. You didn't go to Silver Pines today, did you? He knew. He already knew. I said nothing. Daniel exhaled sharply. Dad, please, don't get involved in things you don't understand. Then explain them to me. I said. Silence. Finally, he spoke. If you love Oliver, stay away from Unit 247. Then he hung up. I stared at the road ahead. My own son had just threatened me. Not directly, but clearly. That night, I opened a locked drawer. Inside was my old military service pistol. Clean, maintained, ready. I held it in my hands. I didn't want violence, but I refused to be powerless. If someone had my grandson in something dangerous, I would find him, no matter who stood in my way. I barely slept again, but before sunrise, I made one more decision. If Unit 247 wouldn't give me answers, I would go to the one person who might. Karen, alone. I waited until evening. Daniel had said they were out of town, but I knew better now. Every word from him had become questionable. So instead of calling, I drove. Their supposed new address was one I had pulled from an old insurance document Daniel once left at my house. He hadn't thought I'd ever look. A modest apartment building. 3rd floor. Unit 12B. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. This time, the door opened a crack. Karen stood there. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Harold, what are you doing here? I didn't raise my voice. Didn't accuse. I simply stepped forward. Where is Oliver? Karen swallowed. He's fine. He's with Daniel. Then let me see him. Her hands tightened on the door. Now isn't a good time. I leaned closer. Karen, I went to Silver Pines. I saw Unit 247. Her face drained of color. She slowly closed the door behind her and stepped into the hallway with me. So the neighbors wouldn't hear. So no one else would know. You shouldn't have gone there, she whispered. Then tell me why my grandson is scared. Tell me why my son lies. Tell me what Unit 247 is. Karen looked away. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she said, it started after your wife died. My breath caught. What? Daniel had been devastated when his mother passed. He'd changed, withdrawn, obsessive about fixing things. Karen's voice trembled. He found a program online, a private organization. They said they helped children reach higher potential, intelligence, discipline, emotional control. They called it developmental isolation training. You're talking about locking children away. They said it wasn't harmful, she protested quietly. They said it was temporary, safe. They promised results. Daniel was convinced Oliver would become extraordinary. He said it was an opportunity we couldn't refuse. My stomach turned. You let strangers take your child. Tears filled her eyes. I didn't know it would be like that. I didn't know they'd cut contact. I didn't know they'd move in between units. Why try to pull him out? They said we'd signed a binding contract. A contract doesn't outrank a child's life. Karen's voice dropped to a whisper. Unit 247 is one of their isolation apartments. Oliver was there last month. He smuggled a note out when I visited. He knew you'd believe him. Daniel didn't. My hands curled into fists. Where is he now? Karen hesitated, then said the words that made my blood run cold. They moved him. To where? Karen shook her head. I don't know. They don't tell parents. Not after enrollment. They said if we interfere, we'll never see him again. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My grandson, taken, hidden, controlled, by an organization. With my son's consent, I took a slow breath. Give me their name, I said. Karen hesitated. Then she opened her phone, hands shaking, and showed me an email. On the screen, Elevation Program. Participant, Oliver Whitmore. Status, transferred. Under it, a single line. Next review, Unit 302. My heart hammered in my chest. Unit 247 was only the beginning. There were more. Karen grabbed my arm. Harold, if you go after them, they'll come after you. They have lawyers, security, influence. Daniel is terrified of losing Oliver completely. I gently removed her hand. Then Daniel has already lost him. I turned to leave. Karen whispered. They said if Oliver disobeys again, he'll be placed in a deep isolation phase. No visites, no messages, no contact. I stopped walking. Deep isolation. A child. Alone. I looked back at her. Tell Daniel, I said quietly. If he wants to save his son, he'd better stop lying to me. I walked down the stairs. Into the night. With a name. With proof. With a mission. And in my pocket, the folded note my grandson had risked everything to give me. Unit 247. But I still didn't know the worst part. Because as I reached my car, my phone buzzed. A new email. From an unknown sender. No name. No greeting. Just one sentence. Stop searching, Harold, or Oliver enters Phase 2 tomorrow. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the email. Stop searching, Harold, or Oliver enters Phase 2 tomorrow. No signature. No explanation. Just a threat. They knew my name. They knew I was investigating, which meant someone was watching me already. I deleted the message. Not out of fear. Out of understanding. If I panicked now, I'd lose. So I did the only thing I could think of. I went home and made a plan. Not a reckless one. Not an emotional one. A careful one. Because whatever this elevation program was, they weren't just a strange parenting choice. They were organized, funded, protected, which meant charging him blindly would only make Oliver disappear faster. I needed information first. Real information. And I knew exactly where to start. The next morning, I visited my old friend Thomas. We served together decades ago. After retirement, he'd gone into private investigation work. Quiet, professional, no unnecessary questions. He opened the door, surprised to see me. Harold, you look like a man who didn't sleep. I need your help, I said. We sat at his kitchen table. I told him everything. The note, Unit 247, the complex, the email, the program. Thomas didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he leaned back. This is bigger than family drama, he said. This is an organization operating in legal gray zones. Possibly offshore funding. Possibly protected by contracts. Can you find them? He nodded slowly. I can try. But you need to understand, once we start pulling this thread, someone might pull back. I'm already being pulled, I said. My grandson is in their hands. Thomas looked at me for a long moment. Then he opened his laptop. Give me the email address, he said. Give me every name, every number, every scrap. For the first time since all this began, I felt a small piece of hope. Not victory, just traction. That evening, Daniel came to my house. Unannounced. He stood in the doorway like a stranger. His eyes were bloodshot, his clothes wrinkled, his hands shaking. Dad, what are you doing? He whispered. I didn't invite him in. I simply stepped aside. He walked to the living room and sat heavily on the couch. I got a message, he said. They told me you're interfering. I stayed standing. Good, I said. Then they know I'm not blind anymore. Daniel covered his face with his hands. I thought I was helping him, he said. They show me studies, testimonials, results. They said ordinary children become extraordinary. I just wanted Oliver to have more than I did. You gave him away, I said quietly. To strangers, without knowing what they really do. Daniel's voice cracked. They told me if I pull him out now, he'll regress. They said I'll never see him again. They own the contract. They own everything. They don't own your son, I said. Daniel looked up at me, desperate. What do I do then? They're everywhere, Dad. Lawyers, clinics, sponsors. They're protected. I sat across from him. Then we stopped being afraid of them. Daniel laughed bitterly. You think you can fight this? I think, I said, that you've forgotten what a parent is supposed to do. He broke then, not loud crying, just silent shaking, like a man whose world had collapsed. Finally, he whispered, there's a meeting, tomorrow night, parent review session. They call it an alignment council. Only approved parents attend. Karen isn't allowed anymore. But I am. I leaned forward. Where? Daniel hesitated, then said, a conference center outside the city. They'll discuss the next phase. Oliver's phase. Phase 2. Tomorrow. My grandson's clock was running. After Daniel left, Thomas called. I found something, he said. My heart tightened. What? Elevation program isn't just one company, Thomas said. It's a network. Multiple shell organizations. Real estate holdings. Private education licenses. Offshore financial channels. And Herald. I traced Unit 247's ownership. I held my breath. It belongs to a holding company, Thomas said. But the director name is real. I waited. The name is Daniel Whitmore. My son, owner of the unit where my grandson had been held. I closed my eyes. The program hadn't just taken my family. It had convinced my son to become part of it. That night, I didn't sleep. But for the first time, I didn't feel powerless either. Tomorrow, Daniel would attend their council. Tomorrow, Thomas would begin filing formal inquiries. Tomorrow, I would follow my son. Not to fight, not to attack, but to expose. Because if this organization thrived in secrecy, then light was the only weapon that mattered. And I was ready to turn it on. The conference center stood alone on the edge of the city. Glass walls, clean white stone, no signs, no name, just a single banner inside the lobby. Elevation, Parent Alignment Council. Daniel walked in confidently. He had done this before. I followed at a distance, not reminding myself that I was a 67-year-old man entering a place designed to keep outsiders out. But I learned long ago, people rarely question an older man who walks like he belongs. Inside, the room was filled with parents. Not desperate, not panicked, proud. They spoke in low, excited voices, like investors awaiting profits. On the stage stood a woman in a silver-gray suit. Perfect posture, perfect smile, eyes that never blinked too long. Welcome, parents, she said. Tonight, we discuss the next evolutionary threshold. My skin crawled. Daniel took a seat near the front. I sat at the back, hidden in plain sight. The woman continued. Phase 1 teaches separation from dependency. Phase 2 teaches self-governance. Phase 3, she paused. Phase 3 creates permanence. A murmur of approval rippled through the room. I leaned forward. Permanence. No parent should ever hear that word about their child in a place like this. A screen behind her lit up. Charts, brain scans, performance metrics, then a list of names. Children, participants. My breath stopped when I saw Oliver Whitmore, Phase 2 candidate. Daniel stared at the screen. His hands were clenched into fists. The woman spoke again. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. Selected participants will transfer to deep isolation environments for final cognitive separation. No parental vocetación. No external contact. No reversals. Deep isolation. Karen's whispered fear echoed in my mind. A child alone. No contact. No exit. Daniel suddenly stood. Wait, he said. I was told Phase 2 was optional. Every eye in the room turned to him. The woman smiled warmly. Daniel, she said, you signed alignment consent. Your son's potential is extraordinary. Why would you deny him completion? Daniel swallowed. He's 8, Daniel said. He's scared. He writes secret notes to his grandfather. A ripple of laughter passed through the room. The woman's smile never changed. Attachment anxiety, she said. A predictable symptom. It will disappear in phase 2. I could see it now. This wasn't education. This wasn't improvement. This was a cult dressed in science and contracts. Daniel slowly sat down, but his face had changed. Something had broken, and something stronger had taken its place. I left before the session ended. I didn't want to be seen. I walked to the parking lot, heart racing, but mind clear. Thomas was waiting in his car. He opened the passenger door. "Tell me everything," he said. I did. Every word, every phrase, every plan. Thomas listened, then pulled out his phone. "I've recorded enough already," he said. "This qualifies as unlawful psychological detention of minors. We have leverage. Is it enough to get Oliver out?" I asked. "Not yet," Thomas said, "but enough to start the collapse." He started the engine. "Tonight," he said, "we send everything to the authorities. Tomorrow, we go public." I looked back at the conference center, at the parents still inside, at the organization that thought itself untouchable. They didn't know what was coming. They didn't know a grandfather with nothing left to lose had walked through their doors. And they didn't know their secrecy was about to die. Because tomorrow, I was getting my grandson back. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear, from anticipation. By sunrise, Thomas had already sent every recording, every document, every ownership trace to Child Protection Services, law enforcement, and investigative journalists. Once information escapes silence, it cannot be returned. At 9:14 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "Mr. Whitmore," a woman's voice said. "This is Child Protective Services. We need you to come to Silver Pines immediately." My heart thundered. "Is my grandson there?" "We believe so. Please come. Do not alert any involved parties." I was already grabbing my coat. When I arrived, police cars surrounded the complex. Officers moved through the buildings. Neighbors watched from balconies. And at the center of it all, Unit 247. The door was open now. No guards. No men in gray jackets. Just officials carrying boxes of documents out, like evidence from a crime scene. Thomas met me at the entrance. "They didn't expect exposure," he said quietly. "Once the warrants came through, the entire network collapsed like paper." "Where is Oliver?" Thomas pointed to an ambulance parked nearby. A social worker stood beside it, and between them, a small boy, wearing a plain gray shirt, clutching a blanket, looking lost. My grandson, Oliver. I didn't run. I walked steadily toward him, so he wouldn't feel hunted anymore. He saw me. His eyes widened, and then he ran. He threw himself into my arms so hard I almost lost balance. "Grandpa," he sobbed. "I thought I'd never see you again." I held him tighter than I ever had. "You're safe now," I whispered. "No one will take you from us again." Behind us, officers continued their work. Karen arrived minutes later, collapsing beside us, crying into Oliver's hair. Daniel arrived last, hands cuffed, not as a villain, as a broken father who had signed away his child's freedom. He looked at me, not angry, not defensive, just ashamed. "I didn't know how to stop," he said. I looked at him for a long moment, then said, "Now you'll learn." Months passed. The elevation program became headline news. Illegal contracts, psychological abuse, corporate deception, executives arrested, assets seized. Unit 247 was no longer a secret. It became evidence. Daniel entered court-mandated counseling. Karen divorced him, but allowed supervised visits. And Oliver came to live with me. He returned to school, to friends, to normal childhood. One night, as I tucked him into bed, he looked at me. "Grandpa," he said, "if I didn't give you the note, would I still be there?" I thought for a moment, then answered honestly, "Yes." He nodded slowly. "I'm glad I chose you," he said. My throat tightened. "So am I," I said. "Today, I still live in the same house, the same quiet street. But every morning, I make breakfast for a boy who laughs again, who plays again, who dreams again. And sometimes when I look at him, I think about that tiny folded note. 2 words that saved a life. Unit 247. A warning, a plea, and a reason I learned that family isn't just love. It's action, even when the world tells you to stay silent.